Good day, weather technology students. In this video, we're going to talk about if-then statements and looping statements within Python, which will help you in your creation of maps by helping you make choices and to repeatedly do tasks. And so we're going to start with just these conceptual overviews of if-then statements before getting into different videos that are going to demonstrate how we do this with coding. And so for if-then statements, what we're really doing is we're using logic. And when we say logic here, we mean setting up things that can be evaluated as true or false to control the flow of our computer code by helping us make choices to set, say, variables a certain way depending on other variables. So how does this really work out? Well, let's first think about this idea of logic. Logic is using syntax that can be evaluated as either true or false. And so we see some examples here. 5 less than 10 is a true statement. And so if we set that equal to a variable name, that would gain the value true. And so the actual value is true. The next example, 100 less than 50, is a false statement. And so then if we set that equal to a variable, 100 less than 50, that would gain the value false, right? Because what's happening is the computer is evaluating these logical statements, this 5 less than 10 and this 100 less than 50, to come up whether that statement is either true or false. And that's what will be stored in the variable. There are a number of different logical operators. We've used the less than symbol here, but we have greater than or equal to, so a greater than sign with an equal sign, less than or equal to. If we wanted to see if something was equal to something else, it's to equal sign, and then not equal uses the exclamation point and equal sign for meaning not equal. So this is the idea of logic and how we can then set up some things, and we can set up variables in our notebooks or within our scripts that then are logical variables that will hold these values of true or false depending on some variable or value statement. But how does this really then work? How does this actually then control our flow within a script? Well, what we want to think about is an example. And so let's think about maybe an example just from everyday life. And with if-then statements, under certain conditions, and only those certain conditions, are we going to want to do something? And so this then form of code helps us to only do things under certain times and then do other things at other times or do nothing at all, as the case may be. So an example might be, if I'm feeling hungry, then I'm going to go find something to eat. And so if I'm feeling hungry is a true statement, then I go into that if statement and I go find something to eat. If, though, I am not feeling hungry, then in this construct that I have here, then I'm say otherwise, I'll continue watching YouTube videos. We didn't necessarily need this otherwise. We could have just not had anything and said, basically, if I'm not hungry, then I just go about whatever I'm doing and not make any other choice. But I could make other choices. This otherwise, in all circumstances, when I'm not hungry, this is what I'm going to do. Or I could actually set up a bunch of if and else if statements constructed together to do something different depending on a couple of different options before then moving forward with other things within the daily life. And so this is just a generic example of how we can structure these if-then statements. Within Python itself, this is the structure. This is the actual code structure that we're going to see when we go to write Python code. And this is like the full complete structure. What we minimally need is a single if colon statement and doing something. Otherwise, we can add in any combination of more else ifs, one or more, else if, another logical statement, do something different. And then if we want to have a catch-all, if all of these statements before it are false, if whatever statement is false, else if this statement is false, else if this third statement is false, then do this final thing. This is kind of a catch-all. And so this is the full if else-if, else structure that we can use to control our flow. For example, we might use something related to time to help us set, say, maybe a date based on the current time, because we know that our observations are not often available right at the top of an hour, or that we only can choose from 4 different runs of the GFS to plot contours, and so we could use if statements to help us choose the most proper time to try to plot. So that's controlling our flow with if statements and choosing when to change a variable setting or choose to do something in particular. Our second thing that we're going to look at is this idea of looping. And so when we want to do a task repeatedly, for example, when we would want to, say, make 5 forecast maps, F00, F06, F12, F18, F24, and so on, looping can help us do it because there's only one small change we need to make to then make our series of maps. And so looping helps us do repeated tasks. And so again here, right, say I want to make the same map just for different times. Maybe this is not even forecast hours, but different times, in sequence, going from, say, March 1st to March 2nd, every 0 and 12 UTC. You can use a loop, right? Because that's a repetitive task, just changing the date. And so looping allows you to repeat the use of your code by making those slight variations with the looping variable. And so we could say, for example, make a 500 millibar map for both 0 and 12 UTC with a loop. And so how does this look then for our code? So in Python, Python is actually pretty good for doing looping over generic lists. And so it has a very particular structure. For, that's a very particular statement in Python. The variable name, you could define it anything you want. In, another reserved word in Python, some sort of list. Remember, a list is anything kind of within square brackets. It could be strings, it could be numeric values, it could be other objects that are list-like. And then again, the colon. The colon is important because that's going to signify going into this loop. And then everything that you want to do within this loop must be indented and contained within this loop. So if we're going to make a map, then everything about reading in our data, to plotting our data, to saving our map, all has to be indented and within this loop. And so here's just a very simple example of which we'll see in a different video when we actually go to run some of these things. For, and then our variable name is called value, in our list that has exactly 2 items, 0 and 12. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to print using an F string. The time is, we're going to take our variable value and print it out using a format of padded 0 to the front for 2 digits long, UTC. And so this example would print out this exact output. The time is 00 UTC, and so first value takes the value of 0 and uses that in this print statement, gets to the end, goes back to the beginning, iterates to the next value, 12, and then the value is 12 UTC. And that's how we get our looping in Python. So that's kind of the brief overview and background just to understand what this idea of if statements are and what looping statements are. In the next video and in class, we're going to then get to try out this looping and these if statements to see how they work and then maybe put it into some code to make maps to help us out there. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.